Hi there, this is Ryan with Vice Software. I wanted to share our new React Redux boilerplate with you and some of the features that we've been working on in there. We have a new project for React and we wanted to take advantage of hooks. We love using Redux, and so we wanted to create a boilerplate that allows developers to be able to be really productive with those tools, and that would allow reducing a lot of the boilerplate code that you might hear people complaining about when it comes to using Redux. So let's go ahead and jump right into the code. What I've got over here is just a super simple app that has two different pages. We've got a router set up that displays these two pages, and currently there's really no significant code. We have a lot of infrastructure code. These are helper functions, and we've created some widgets which allow doing layout, like our nav bar, page, which gives us this common styling for each page. But in our features, we just have these two components that just kind of put out a header. So let's go ahead and add our first feature. Every app is going to need features, so let's start out with that. What we're going to do is this new file from template here. This is a feature of this new project by, it looks like Blueprint, which I'll pull it over to the screen real quick for you. This is a VS Code plugin, which I'm starting to really like. Basically what it does is it allows you to define a Blueprint templates folder, and within there you can create another named folder which will become your template, and you can define these code patterns which will create folders and files, and it's really powerful. If you used Visual Studio .NET in the past, it's similar to the templates in there. So we'll go ahead and create our first template, which is this React hook template, which is the name of that folder I had just shown. We'll pick that one. We're going to call it users because that's what it is. This is going to create this users folder here. It creates a lot of files for us. And our philosophy is that one of the best things about JavaScript is the module pattern, which is implemented by CommonJS. And for those of you who aren't familiar with those terms, basically what that means is it's a pattern for taking JavaScript and making it into almost object-like structures. And it was first done by Node, and it's most familiar to most folks by this import and export syntax. And so what we like about the CommonJS pattern is that if you have a folder and you put an index file in there, you can define an interface to the outside world. Everything is available in JavaScript. You can't really make things truly private and things like that. But what this does is allow you to do encapsulation pretty much by intent. You let folks know this is what is available to you, and we call this our standard interface. So every one of our feature modules is going to expose components, constants, action types, effects, selectors, and reducers. That's all pretty standard stuff that you need in React Redux. And if you've done React Redux, you're probably familiar with most of these except effects, which is new to hooks, and selectors maybe not. That's an idiomatic pattern in Redux, but not everyone uses it. And so let's go ahead and wire up this user feature real quick, and I'll explain the custom interface as we go along. So the first thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and add our data to the reducer. So what we'll do there is we'll go ahead and just import from from features, users, and we're going to grab the whole module. So we just say users there. And since we know that we're doing a React Redux application, we've got this set up to help make that easy. And so whenever you do a React Redux application, you have to give combined reducers an object that has a name, a property for each state slice with an associated reducer. So we're going to name those using our constants. So we'll say user constants state name, users. Sorry, if I actually type this right, we would get some IntelliSense, I believe. There, and if we click over to that, we'll see that in this constants folder that was created for us, we have a state name defined user. JavaScript is, I mean, you can use TypeScript, but we like loose JavaScript, and some of these little patterns like this can help you make it easier to refactor. So if you change the name of users to something else in the future, you could just change that in one place and it would also update here. And then we need to set that equal to the user reducer. So we can do that here. So now that has us set up with our data flow, but there's no way to get to our component right now. So we'll need to pull that guy in. We'll go ahead and just copy one of these lines here in our router file, and we'll grab the user module. Once again, we just pull in user like this. And because of the standard interface that we were looking at, which I showed before, we already used the constants, we can come in here and just say that we want to get, I usually like to do this because I think it helps with the IntelliSense a little bit. And we should call that users, sorry. So users, we want to get from the components, we want to get the user. User. And so that should be an equal. And so if we go over and click in here, you'll see that we have components, and components exposes users. And that's why it's not giving me it. It's users. And now what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and create a route for it. So we'll copy one of these page routes. This is just using React Router, and page route is just a little functional component that wraps your route in this page, and the page just adds some styling and things like that and gives you a scene where in the future you could add cross-cutting concerns. And so we'll go ahead and say that this is going to be the users, and we'll say users here. Save. And get an error. What doesn't it like? I can't find modules, features, users. What did I misspell? Oh, it's users. I keep missing that S over and over again, don't I? So now let's see if our route works. And boom, now we have an asynchronous page loading some users. If we look over here on the right, if you're familiar with Redux, you'll see that we had 3 actions fire there. So I can reload the page and show you that again. So we have this first action, get all users async requested async. Okay, so I didn't name that super well. We need to pull out one of those asyncs. But basically, this is, if you're following idiomatic Redux, when you do an async call to the API, you should fire a requested action, and you should fire a received when the data comes back. So you see the difference down here shows all users got populated. So if we follow the flow through state there, all users was empty, and then it returned data. So that's a lot of stuff happening considering we didn't really write any code for that yet. So how did that happen? Let's take a quick look over here at our reducer. So these are the 2 actions we saw getting fired: all users async received, and all users by ID. I'm sorry, all use async received. So when the app first loads, the state is going to basically just have an empty array there, and that's because we're returning state equals initial state, which is all users as an empty array. Now when this all users async comes through, that's when we get our data come back, and that's when we see these 2 pieces over here come out. So how did that happen? Let's go ahead and take a look at users real quick. If you haven't seen React with hooks, it's really great. As you can see, this is a pretty small component to be using all the Redux overhead of having dispatching actions and reducers being wired up and all of that. And so how does that work exactly? So Redux hooks is going to make you use the selector pattern. And previously selector was idiomatic, but it wasn't required. Now it feels more required. And so if we go over and look at our folder over here, we'll see that their template creates for us a few selectors out the box. We've got get all users, which is going to go to state, users, all users, and then we have get all users by ID, which you could pass an ID to, and then that will go ahead and find the item for the user for you by ID. The selector pattern is the same philosophy as having a data access layer over your database. it's generally not considered good practice to have your database queries mixed in with the rest of your code. Usually you put those inside of their own objects. And so what we're doing here is we co-locate the selectors with the actual feature that we're working on, which is the reducer is going to create the state shapes that the selectors allow us to query. And so you want to keep those things together. If for nothing else, it makes it easier to work on that code, but more importantly, if we want to move this somewhere else, we can just grab the whole thing and move it, and it all goes together. And so then that's how our data is being read by the component using the selector get all users. But how does the data actually get fetched from wherever it's getting fetched from? That's happening right here. Use get all users. So this use prefix is basically React Hooks convention that lets you know that this is an effect. And an effect is basically a way of adding behavior to a function using closures for the most part. And what I've done is I used to call these, everyone did really, but in our standard interface it used to be action creators, but now we're doing user.effects. And we create a couple standard effects for you there. And as you can see, the get all users effect is basically going to use this use async, which is another effect which is part of the boilerplate. And you can just specify a URL, an action type, and the action type you specify here will support firing off these 3 different actions for when data is requested, when it's received, and if there's an error. And then you can also just specify a dummy response. And so the dummy response is helpful because a lot of times the front end guys are ahead of the back end team, guys or girls, and so that's why we put that in there. You can just put a dummy response. You could also put a dummy error, and the code will basically create a delay for you, so you see your loading handler and all that. And then when you have the real code ready, you can come in, and if you look in here, I've created a proxy for this JSON placeholder. If we take that and put that in our browser with /users, that's just a dummy. I love this guy. You can call and try out code like I'm doing using this API, and it works for real. So what we can do is we could come in to our effect. Where is it at? Let me grab it over here. Come into our effect here and just comment out this line, and then let's go over to our component. Currently our component is just writing out these items which don't have any properties, but we can tell from over here that our users have names and IDs and things like that. So let's just make this more specific to the actual data. So we'll say this is the user ID for the key and the user name for that. And so now if we save everything, you see that we get back the same data that's over here. Lena Graham, Evan Howell, that's what's coming back here. And then if we go ahead and take a look at the network tab, you'll see that that call actually went out. It's showing localhost, but it's actually the React proxy. I don't know who added that proxy, if it's create React app or React or who supports that. But I do know that if you come in here and add proxy, it will proxy the local URL to whatever you specify there. So that's pretty much it. So now we have added a new feature to our app, which I have a little bit of sample code in the templates. This should actually say users. We've added a new feature to our app using the standard interface that we believe in. With all of this boilerplate code that, could take you 30 minutes to type up all this code, and, folks are generally not super excited about that. But using this blueprint template, we've made it to where you can just right click, add a feature, get it up and running fairly quickly, and then it already is wired up to fake the data call to a server. And then if you want to make a real call to the server, it's fairly easy to do that. And then if we want to put it back to the fake call, we just do that. Oh wait, we'd have to update our shape of our data, which isn't really a big deal. We just put this name property in there. That's interesting. I'm going to reload it. There we go. So uh, so that's what we have. And right now, I don't know if you've noticed or not, but if we save, this will pretty for you. It does linting. So we've got a lot of really nice features in this boilerplate, and some of that magic that's happening with the with use async. That code is all down here. So use async is basically just using an effect here. And the use async allows you to basically add these effects that will get called, and you can specify the dependencies you want to use, so that if it's dependent on a user ID changing or something like that, you can do that there. And then under the hood, that uses this use dispatch async, which is also in the code. And this handles these dummy responses and all that, and then it will just use fetch to go to the server. Currently, we don't have it supporting all the features it's going to support, but basically the idea is that in the future you could do things like etc., and we'll make it post. And we've done all that in these non-Redux hooks based architectures. So that's it for this time. I hope that was useful for y'all, and if anybody wants to use the boilerplate, feel free. And if you ever have any questions about it, feel free to reach out to me. Have a good day.